Okay, we're rolling again, friends. So, I'd like for you to be able to list those 5 views. That should be no problem, as much attention as we've given to list the 5 views. Give one author, at least one author on each one, and be able to summarize that, a paragraph, just to tell the main direction that it takes. So, let's review some of the books now, so you can make a note of this if you need to. But in a few that we've been giving the most attention to, you could list my book, you could list J.W. Roberts' commentary on Revelation, Ray Summers' Worthy is the Lamb, Homer Haley's commentary, among others. Then on the Jerusalem View, which one, name the author we followed on that one. Foy Wallace. There are members of Churches of Christ that hold all 5 of these views, I might add. So here's Foy Wallace, the Jerusalem View. The view on that Hendrickson takes. Somebody did you do that one?
Yeah.
Okay. That's Hendrickson. More Than Conquerors is the name of his book. Burton Kaufman would fall into that category generally as another one among Churches of Christ. Hendrickson would not be, but Burton Kaufman would be among Churches of Christ that holds that view. On the view about the historical view, of course, Hines was in the Gospel Advocate series. Hugo McCord took that view generally. So some of our really good people have held that view. I grew up, that's the view I grew up on, hearing. It was very common. That was the most common view of Revelation in Churches of Christ a century ago when I was growing up. Anyway, that was a common view then to be held. Then the view of the premillennial view, Al Lindsay would be one that holds that view. Among Churches of Christ, there is a school, Kentucky Christian College, that is a premillennial school among Churches of Christ, people who hold this view. So there was a time back in the 30s and 40s, I guess, when it was important to know. When we need to realize that there was a kind of a major parting of the ways over this issue in the church, rather strong division in the church over this issue. And Foy Wallace was one, and others who stood strongly against the premillennial position and kept the church generally from going that direction. Whereas there were still some who held that view. And so there have been those in our church, still are, who hold that view. The strongest book, I think one of the strongest books of anybody that holds that view is, the name of the book is Until, U-N-T-I-L. I'm going to have to tell you later the name of the author. It's escaping right now. But he was a Baptist preacher who was converted to church, but still held this view. He wrote the books on about the elect and the Son. Robert Shank, that's it, thank you. Robert Shank wrote the book Until. And it is strong. I'm telling you, if you aren't well grounded, you'll come out believing this view. It is the best. It is the one that is most likely to be convincing of any of these. I mean, Lindsay doesn't convince me very much, but boy, this one is man, it's full of scripture, and it is strong stuff. And so he writes a very convincing story in the book Until.
Is this the premillennial view you're saying?
Yeah, the premillennial view, Robert Shanks. My point is there are people in churches of Christ that hold all these views. Now, I think the one that is becoming by far the most predominant view is this Roman view that we've been talking about. But there are people in churches of Christ that hold them all, and have written good descriptions of those views, all those views. So you need to be able to list the views, describe each one of them in a paragraph, and name some author that would hold that view. That would be one of the questions on the final exam. Okay. Now let's go back to our study of Revelation. We're picking up in chapter 12. Chapter 12. Now, I go behind the blue picture up here.
You're getting out of the frame, but
okay. It'll be okay as you report.
We can still hear you fine.
Right. Now, let's talk then about chapter 12. Chapter 12. In chapter 12, we're introduced to a woman. And how is she described? Tell me how this woman is described in chapter 12.
Clothed with the sun.
Okay. She is clothed with the sun. Sun's wrapped around her shoulders. And so she is, must be a pretty powerful figure, yes?
Is this the start of Act 2?
Act 2, yes, this is the start of Act 2. I'm having more trouble with my computer here. Just hang on a minute. Can you get a cursor? You want to come see if you can put this to... I'm just trying to get a cursor and turn that off. You'll find it. May have to turn it all off and start it over.
You may have to jump.
Okay, so we're coming to chapter 12. And this is the start of Act 2. We had the end of Act 1, the end of chapter 11, joy in heaven. And so now we're coming to chapter 12 and Act 2. And we're getting a fresh start. Now, we've said this is Act 2, but it is going to be an act which overlaps a little with Act 1. In other words, the two are going to... Act 1 went to here, and Act 2 is going to pick up here and move past that. So they overlap just a little bit. And take a little different tack on some things, but it is sort of a new beginning in chapter 12. So here is a woman. She has the sun wrapped around her shoulders. She's standing on the moon. 12 stars are on her head. And what condition is she in?
Pregnant.
She's pregnant, okay? She's about to bear a child. And she's just about to deliver. And standing by is a dragon. A great red dragon. Standing by to devour the child. Okay. Now, the dragon wants to devour the child. So we've got here the woman, we've got a dragon, we've got a child. Let's begin some identification here. First of all, let's identify the dragon. Look in chapter 12, verse 9, or chapter 20, verse 2, and you can tell me who is the dragon. Okay. So here's the one. Now, so the dragon, this great huge dragon, is standing by to devour the child. And who is the child? Any clues? What description is given of the child? Ah, read that louder.
To rule all nations with a rod of iron.
He will rule all the nations with a rod of iron. Rule all nations with a rod of iron. Does that send any bells going off in your head? What's that a quotation from? Psalm 2. You got Psalm 2. And that is a messianic psalm. So, of course, it is the Christ who is going to rule the nations with a rod of iron. And so there, we know this is Christ about to be born. We're going to come back and identify the woman in a minute. So kind of leave that aside until we get more characteristics of the woman on the table. And then we'll come back and identify her. But here is this child being born who shall rule the nations with a rod of iron. And what does the dragon want to do to the child? Devour the child. Is he successful? What happens? The child is swept up into heaven. And so he can't devour the child. Now I want to put before you a vivid image that you'll never forget. I was teaching this one time to a group of college students in a church building. We were meeting in the auditorium of the church on Wednesday night for this class. Large group of students, several hundred students. And I was giving to the various groups in the class assignments to act out certain portions of the story. So the students would, remember these things acted out. And so I gave a group to act out the woman and the dragon and the child. Okay, so they had this guy who was dressed up in a sheet and on some stilts, so he was, really big and tall and standing on the moon and the sun around his shoulders. And he had a rather large stomach, pregnant. And so they read the scripture. They read about the child being born. So he reached in and pulled out the child. A little doll, here was the child. And the dragon, they had a dragon over here, and the dragon was ferocious, trying to get the child, and he turned and threw the child up into the baptistry, and that was how he escaped from the devil. He was thrown up into the baptistry. So somehow that image has stayed with me all these years of this particular passage. I hope it doesn't ruin the passage for you. Okay, so the child is caught up in heaven. Now what we're going to see in Revelation 12.
It says that things have recognized another pruning device. So to say that this
when the internet just kicked on. I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
I don't think so. It gave me a note, and it said that it's recognized another pruning device plugged in there. I haven't seen any pruning device plugged in there. But it disabled the panel. Just turn it off. Yeah. It just got snaked in at the wrong time.
So, in Revelation 12, we're going to find 4 attacks of Satan. Satan's going to make 4 attacks. What's happening here is that Christ, through the book of Revelation, is revealing to the church Satan's strategy. What is his strategy? What is his game plan? If you watch NFL football on Sunday, if the opposing team knew the other team's game plan, that would make it easier to win the victory, wouldn't it? So here is a presentation of Satan's game plan. His first The first attack was he's going to try to stop Jesus from doing what he came to do on earth. Okay? Going to stop him from doing what he came to do on earth. That's when he's born, isn't it? Did Satan attack Christ on earth? How did Satan try to stop Jesus from doing what he came to do on earth?
Temptation.
Say again?
That's a temptation.
Okay. Temptation, killing the babies in Bethlehem. I guess he thought when he got him killed that was going to prevent him from doing what he came to do, and so on. So Satan attacked Jesus on earth. That was his first attack, and that's what this one is about. Satan attacked Jesus. But were his attacks successful? Not successful. So they were not successful, and therefore Satan is not going to be satisfied with stopping after the first attack. Satan is persistent. If he's not anything else, brother, he is persistent. So, here comes attack number 2, according to Revelation chapter 12. We now are carried from earth, where Jesus is born, up to heaven. And what is the second attack? As you look at this passage in chapter 12, what is the second effort that Satan makes against Jesus?
War in heaven.
War in heaven. War in heaven. He's trying to create war he creates war in heaven. Now, the passage is not real specific about what the details of the war, but let's glean what we can from it. Satan, who is on one side? Satan and his angels, okay? Who's on the other side fighting him? Michael and the good angels. So Michael and the good angels are fighting Satan and the bad angels, okay? Now don't think heaven. You know, heaven has more than one meaning. We have to be careful about this. Birds fly in the heaven, okay? That's not this is. Heaven is the eternal abiding place of the righteous. But heaven also sometimes means the spirit realm. You know, in the book of Ephesians, Paul talks about, what term does he use in Ephesians to talk about the spirit realm?
Powers and principalities.
In the heavenly places. See, in the heavenly places. The principalities and powers. Those aren't all good powers either, are they? See, some of them are bad powers in the heavenly places. So in the spirit realm, think here spirit realm, not heaven, meaning like we're going to see in Revelation 21, but heaven in the sense of the spirit realm. Satan creates war in the spirit realm. Now, what's the war over? Somebody read Revelation 12, starting at about verse 8, and read for a verse or two, and I'll tell you when to stop. John, go ahead.
But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them night and day before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives, even unto death.
Okay. Now, what happens as a result of the war? According to those verses, what happens? Satan's thrown down, which allows what?
Persecution for the church.
Read again. What? Since Satan has been thrown down,
Salvation.
Go ahead and read that.
Salvation and power and the kingdom of our God
According as Christ has come.
Okay. What was Satan trying to prevent? The coming of the kingdom and salvation and the power. Okay, am I stretching that, you think? Is that okay? So when Satan is defeated, what he was trying to prevent got to happen. Now let me put that in maybe a little bit more graphic terms. How are we doing? Okay, so there's been war in heaven, and what's Satan been doing? He created war in heaven to try to keep Jesus from taking his rightful place as our Savior. Is what I get out of that verse, you see. Now in Acts chapter 2, verse 36, what does Peter say? God has made him both Lord and Christ, is Jesus whom you crucified. So Christ now has been made Lord in Christ by the day of Pentecost. Prior to that, somehow, Satan was trying to prevent Jesus from taking his place as Lord in Christ. Prevent him from presenting his blood at the altar in heaven, okay, as our sacrifice, and therefore to be the Savior of the world. And since Satan has been thrown down, the kingdom and the power have come, because Satan couldn't stop it. Now, on that part, I feel pretty good. What I don't feel very good on is how they fought the war. How do angels fight? They have these long laser things. I don't know how angels fight. That's a mystery to me, how angels can fight. It says something about being conquered with the blood of the Lamb. But I don't know how the war was fought. I don't have much to suggest on how the war was fought. But it does say that the outcome of the war is Satan loses. And because he loses, the salvation and the kingdom and the power have come. So we know what the war was about. That's what the war was about.
It gives us this message.
Have we got another computer somewhere? This is on a disk.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it on this jump drive?
We can
handle that. We gotta get it.
We're doing technology here in front of the world and everybody. My computer is frozen up and the cursor won't move, and so we've restarted 2 or 3 times and it doesn't change it, so I don't know what the problem is, but anyhow, we're going to bring another computer. We see that war, and that's attack number 2. That's attack number 2. Now, we're going to have now attack number 3. Satan's going to make attack number 3. Tell me about attack number 3.
The woman.
He attacks the woman. We still haven't discovered who she is yet, and we have to wait a little while before we get a few more pieces in order. But he attacks the woman. And how does God protect the woman?
The wilderness?
Say again?
The wilderness?
Yeah, she goes out of the wilderness and he gives her wings to fly. The woman has wings, and she flies into the wilderness where God protects her for a period of 1260 days, or 42 months, or time, times, I believe it says time, times, and half a time, doesn't it? Time, times, and half a time. So, God is going to protect the woman, and Satan, he will not let Satan prevent, stop, harm the woman. You can't do that. Okay. Now, we're going to come to attack number 4. Tell me, what is attack number 4? You got it? Yeah, exactly. He is now going to attack the offspring, the children of the woman. And the children of the woman are described as the one who keeps the commandments and hold the testimony of Jesus. So that would mean Christians. The children of the woman are Christians. The children of the woman are Christians. So, what have we got here? Satan's 4th attack is going to be on the church. It's going to be on the children of the woman who are Christians. And so Satan has said something like this in his mind. I tried to stop Jesus on earth from doing what he came to do on earth. I tried to get him killed as a little baby. I tried to tempt him to misuse his gifts and powers. I got him killed, but even that didn't stop him. So God took him up into heaven, and as having finished his work. So Satan says, I didn't succeed there, but I'm not done yet. I then tried to create war in heaven to stop Jesus from taking his place, his rightful place at the right hand of God, where he would be Lord in Christ, where he could be the ruler in his kingdom, where he could be the Savior of the world. I tried to stop that. But Gabriel and his angels prevented me, and I couldn't stop that, and so I failed in that one. Then I tried to attack the woman. But God said no to that. He wouldn't let me have her. And he put her so she would be safe. And finally, Satan says, okay, I failed in the first 3, but I got plan number 4. Plan number 4 is, I'm going to persecute the church out of existence. I'm going to attack the seed of the woman. I'm going to attack the seed of the woman. And so he is now going to mount his 4th attack. And who will he attack? He's going to attack individual Christians. And those individual Christians are going to be subject to this terrible persecution that Satan is about to unleash. And the next chapter, chapter 13, reveals more about Satan's strategy. He's going to bring up 2 helpers that are pictured here as beasts to be his helpers in trying to stamp out the church by persecution. Now here's the deal. Here's what Satan is saying. I couldn't stop Jesus on earth. I couldn't stop Jesus in heaven. I couldn't stop the woman, whoever she is. We'll come back to that. But if I can kill all the Christians, if I can mount such an attack on the Christians, that they either have to deny their faith because they're afraid of the persecution, or they get killed because of the persecution. Either way, I'm going to win. I believe I can win this 4th attack. And that 4th attack is what the book of Revelation is all about. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Now, a brief summary. As we go back through our pictures here. Revelation 12, woman standing on the moon and the sun and the stars, on the moon with the sun around her shoulders and the stars around her head. And she's about to bear a child. Meanwhile, a great red dragon with 7 heads is waiting to attack her. And in Revelation 12:9, we're told that that dragon is the devil, Satan. Okay? And so we see that picture. Here's an artist's conception of that. You see over here the woman standing on the moon with the sun around her shoulders, the brilliance around her shoulders, stars around her head. and the great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and his tail sweeping a third of the stars out of the sky. So that's an artist's conception of the woman and the dragon. All right? So, now, the child is born, and Satan seeks to devour the child, and that's attack number 1. Attack number 1. The child is called the one who shall rule the nations with a rod of iron, and so he's caught up to heaven, and that would be Christ. I don't know of any interpreter of Revelation that does not agree this is Christ being born, so I think that's, they would all pretty well agree with that. They don't all agree who the woman is, but they all believe. They don't all agree on who gave birth to Christ. They all believe Christ is the one who killed. Then there's war in heaven. Satan and his angels versus Michael and his angels. And Satan is cast down, and that means that now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. Why have they come? Satan was defeated in what he was trying to do. The accuser of our brethren has been thrown down. I also love that verse because without Christ, what could Satan accuse me of? A lot. But he can't accuse me. Satan can't accuse me of one thing anymore. Why not? All the bad stuff's been taken away with the blood of Jesus. Isn't that beautiful? Because you put that on your sermon list. They're making lists of sermons, okay? You better put that on your sermon list. Because Christ has taken his place, Satan is no longer our accuser. So in the final judgment day, Satan can't marshal his forces against me and accuse me of all kinds of sins because they've all been expunged from the record. Okay, now, there was then attack number 3. Satan attacks the woman. And the woman is given 2 wings to fly into the wilderness where she'll be protected for times and half a time, which would be equal to 1,260 days or 42 months, this time period that we're going to see several times through here. It was back in chapter 11. Here it is in chapter 12. It'll be in chapter 13. And signifies, I believe, this period of time under which the church is going to be under attack, and we'll say more about that in a minute. But the woman is protected. Then comes the 4th attack. Satan will attack the children of the woman. And they are described as the ones who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Now let that sink in for a minute. What does this tell you about the woman? About who the woman is? The woman is the mother of all Christians. She's the mother. Christians are her children, her offspring. So this woman is the mother of Christians. We'll need that in a minute. We'll identify the woman. Okay. Satan then is going to bring 2 beasts to help him in this attack. Now let's go back and see about the woman. Who's the woman? Well, some say the woman is Mary. After all, didn't Mary give birth to Jesus? Yes. Would you call Mary the mother of all Christians? No. You ever remember when Mary was given 2 wings to fly into a wilderness for 3.5 years? And if we're going to talk about the literal mother of Mary, the literal mother of Jesus, then these other things have to be literal too. She has to have wings, and she has to have flown out into the wilderness for 3.5 years, and she has to have given birth to every Christian. I don't believe that's going to work, do you? Okay, another view is that the woman is Israel. That's a pretty common view. The woman is Israel. Is there a sense in which you would say that the nation of Israel gave birth to Jesus? Yeah. When he was of Jewish descent, wasn't he? That'll work. It's okay. Yeah. The nation of Israel, he was of Jewish descent, the descendant of David. He was born of Israel. Okay. But did God protect Israel from destruction? What happened in 70 A.D.? If this is Israel, and God protected Israel, then why did Israel get destroyed? That doesn't fit. And would you say that Israel became the mother of all Christians when the majority of Jews did what? They turned Jesus down. How could the nation, which Jesus describes in a lot of his parables as rejecting him, you'd think that nation that rejected him is going to be called the mother of the church? I don't think so. Well, some say that the woman is the church. That'd make a wonderful picture, wouldn't it? I mean, the church is glorious and radiant, the stars around her head, and standing on the moon, and the sun around her shoulders, and boy, just a beautiful. After all, the church is the bride of Christ, right? And so the church gave birth to Jesus. Uh-oh. That didn't work very well, did it? That didn't work very well. And would you say that the church is the mother of the church? That Christians are the offspring of the church? That doesn't work very well. Well, have we exhausted all the possibilities? I think there's at least one more. And that's the one toward which I lean. And that is that the woman is something that gave birth to Jesus, mother of the church, that Satan wants to stop. And I believe that the woman is the personification of the plan of God. Let's think about that a minute. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, Paul talks about those who are called according to his plan, according to his purpose. There's the purpose, the plan of God. And we're called by that plan. That's how we became Christians. We're called by the plan. And so the plan of God gave birth to Jesus. Ephesians chapter 3. Paul talks about how the manifold wisdom of God came to fulfillment. The things the people in the past wanted to see into and couldn't, and gradually it's unfolded until finally the mystery. What is the mystery? It's the plan of God, isn't it? The mystery is made known. And that mystery gave birth to Jesus. It was the unfolding of God's plan that gave birth to Jesus. It was the unfolding of his plan that allowed me to become a Christian, wasn't it? And you? That's how we became Christians. We became acquainted with the plan of God. Satan wanted to attack the plan of God and keep it from going into effect, and God said, no, you can't do that. I've been working on this for centuries. You're not going to put a stop to that. I'm going to protect that woman, and I'm going to send her out in the wilderness where you can't touch her. So I believe the best explanation of the woman is she is a personification of the plan of God. And think of the picture of her as a beautiful, glorious woman who is pure and undefiled and powerful. The plan of God revealed, the mystery made known. And so that's what I understand as the best explanation of who the woman is. Now, let's go back now to Satan's attack number 4. So we've seen Satan's strategy in advance. He tried to stop Christ on earth. He tried to stop Christ from taking his place in heaven as a king. That was attack number 2. Attack number 3, attack the woman, the plan of God. And so attack number 4 is going to try to stop the church by persecution. It's attack number 4. And so we're now going to, chapter 13 is going to tell us more about how he's going to stop the church by persecution. And that brings us to that brings us to chapter 13. So here's the dragon again. Satan, pictured as a dragon. and he's going to try to stop the church. He's going to bring up two beasts, and here's the first beast that he's going to bring up. Comes up out of the sea. He has paws like a bear, body like a leopard, mouth like a lion, 7 heads, 10 horns, ferocious beast that Satan brings up as a helper. Now, we need to identify who this beast is. Who is he? Okay? He brings up two beasts to be his allies, to be his helpers. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a repeat of what we had yesterday when we were laying the foundation, but I don't think that repetition will hurt us any. Let's go back through the identification of this beast. Satan is thinking, I want to stop the church. I want to get rid of all the Christians. What is the greatest power on earth, Satan says back in the 1st century, what is the greatest power on earth that I could use to help me get rid of the church? What is the strongest force available? Well, that's I believe what he wants to do is to bring that force to be his ally. So this beast comes up from, we'll see the characteristics of the beast. He comes up from the sea, 7 heads and 10 horns. He has a body like a leopard, mouth like a lion, paws like a bear. Okay. What passage in the Old Testament does that bring us to? Daniel chapter 7, exactly. Where there are 4 successive animals. There is a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a ferocious beast with 10 horns. What do those 4 animals represent? Not specifically, but in general, what do they represent?
World powers.
World powers, empires, okay? And they represent specific world empires. The first one, the lion, represents the Babylonians. The second one, the bear, represents the Medes and Persians. The leopard represents the fast-moving Grecian Empire. The leopard is a beautiful picture of that. The fast-moving Grecian Empire. It's interesting. You can go to, if you go to Berlin today, and go to what's called the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, where they have the great altar to Zeus that was taken from Pergamum, and may be what John referenced in the letter to the church at Pergamum as the altar of Satan at Pergamum. It is an altar as big as this room. I mean, it is huge. Big steps leading up to it. I mean, not just a little thing to put a sacrifice on. It's a whole big, beautiful, ornate structure, kind of a building. It's called the altar. That's why it's called the Pergamum Museum. But right next to that, in the room next to that, they have the gates, the Ishtar gates from Babylon. As you walked up to go into the city of Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar built this beautiful city, beautified the city. And on the sides are, on the gate is an arched opening like that. It's not a gate that it opens like a door, but a gate that has an archway you walk through. And on either side of it, Nebuchadnezzar had put animals. What animals do you suppose he put there? Lions. Now there are other animals there too, but it's interesting to me. He put lions there, and so Daniel's book represents Nebuchadnezzar as a lion, kind of interesting. So we've got the lion, the leopard, the bear, and then the 4th animal is not described except says it's got 10 horns and it's ferocious, it's got great teeth and so on. And that beast, the 4th one in that sequence would have been the Roman Empire, the one following the Grecian Empire, the Roman Empire. So John here makes use of these things from from Daniel 7, which I think tells us 2 or 3 things here at the very outset. We're not going to use that as the only way to identify this beast, but clearly he seems, by using that language, he seems to be suggesting that this beast represents a world empire, doesn't he? I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? He would certainly lead you in the wrong direction to say all these things from Daniel about world empires, and that's not what John is talking about. So it clearly seems to be a world empire. And it seems to be connected with the 4th one with the 10 horns. And to take it one step further, the Roman Empire was made up of territories that had been controlled by the Babylonians, the Medes and Persians, and the Greeks. And so pieces of those empires now make up part of the body of this animal. Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Well, okay, that's what we might think at first blush as we look at who this beast is. But there are other clues, and we need to see if they confirm this or lead us in another direction. All right? Is that fair? So let's look at other clues. Chapter 13, verses 5 to 7. Very important verses in giving us clues about this beast. This beast reigns over tribes and tongues and people and nations. Pretty big empire. Pretty big empire. Tribes and tongues and people and nations. Those verses also tell us that everybody worships the beast. Everybody worships the beast. Well, they deify the beast. They make a god out of this empire. The third thing that comes out of these verses is that this beast is going to make war on the saints for 42 months. There's our time period again, 3.5 years, 1260 days, 42 months. The beast, whoever he is, whatever world empire he is going to persecute Christians for this period called 42 months. War on the saints. What did Satan say he was going to do in the last verse of chapter 12? Mount an attack on those who testify Jesus. And he brings up this beast who makes war on the saints, you see. So he makes war on the saints for 42 months. Well, we're looking then for an empire that may be connected with Daniel's 4th beast, we're trying to find out, that rules over tribes and tongues and peoples and nations, that becomes the object of people's worship, and that makes war, persecutes the church for some period of time that may be represented symbolically by 42 months. All right, now let's look at some more of the characteristics. We go to chapter 17, which gives us some more characteristics of this beast. These are not the only 2 places it's mentioned by any means, but from these 2 places, chapter 13 and chapter 17, we get the most identifying marks. Okay, the most identifying marks. And here, we're told what his 7 heads represent. 7 heads. We were told back in 13 he had 7 heads. His 7 heads represent 7 kings. So we've got an animal here that represents an empire, and the heads of the beast represent the kings of that empire, the emperors, the rulers of that empire. And it speaks specifically of 7 of them. It also describes those 7 as 5 are past, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come, and then there's an 8th, which is really one of the 7. Okay. What do you learn from that set of expressions right there? What conclusion can we draw? It was a power in existence when John wrote the book. It had been going on for a while. Five have passed. One other is reigning now, and one is yet to come. And then there's still another one, an eighth, which may be said to be one of the seven. Now, I'm about to give you a possibility for that, okay? I wouldn't say that I feel as certain about this as I do about who the beast is, but let me at least throw up a possibility of this. There are... Why did Julius Caesar get killed? No Shakespeare fans in the group here? Had two Brute and all that? Why did Julius Caesar get killed? Why was he assassinated? Because he tried to make himself emperor. That made some people mad, and they killed him. But what's really interesting is the next guy up became an emperor, and people accepted it. Poor old Julius got a bad rap, didn't he? So we have Augustus, that now becomes the first emperor of Rome. And there's some others. There's Caligula, and Caligula and some of these others in there. The fifth one in that list is Nero. Nero was the fifth of those that actually became emperors. Claudius was one, and so on. So here is Nero is the fifth. The one after Nero, number 6, was Vespasian. Vespasian. After that, his son, be number 7 on our list, whose name was? Not yet, not quite. Titus. Titus was number 7. And how does the Bible describe the one who is to come? A little while. He's just going to reign a little while. Titus reigned only 2 years. And then there's an 8th, which is one of the 7. And the 8th in that list would be, you had it a while ago, the 8th would be Domitian. Vespasian had 2 sons, Titus and Domitian. So that's 8. Now let's see where that list would take us. Remember, I didn't say this was the only option. And I'm not sure that I could prove this option beyond a doubt. Well, let's look at where that takes us. Nero was number 5. From the Christian standpoint, what was Nero the first to do?
All the persecution.
Persecute the church. He was the first one to persecute the church. And so he had run some Christians out. You remember Paul's friends had been run out of Rome? The tent makers? Aquila and Priscilla? That was under Nero. Paul likely was executed under Nero. He first was carried there to Rome for trial, and then later, we're not told the story, but apparently he goes back and is assassinated, executed under Nero. So Nero is number 5, and he was a persecutor of the church. Vespasian didn't persecute the church. Titus didn't persecute the church. And then there's an 8th, Domitian, which is like one of the first 7. What's he like one of the first 7 in?
Persecuting the church.
Persecuting the church. And that's pretty interesting, isn't it? He's like Nero. Now, to carry that a little further, look back at chapter 13. And look at the description given of the heads of the beast in chapter 13. There's 7 heads, and what is said of one of them? what is said of one of the heads in chapter 13?
That's a slain.
Say again?
Slain.
Yeah, read that whole thing about that description of him.
I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. And the whole
Ah.
earth was amazed.
He had a fatal wound that was healed. Like one of the seven. Eighth is like one of the seven. Now here's the explanation someone given of that. Nero persecuted the church, number 5, so he would be one of the seven. It looked like he's been killed and come back to life again. And over here is number 8, which is like one of the first 7 come back to life. There was in those days what's called the Nero Redivivus myth. The Nero Redivivus myth. What does redivivus mean?
Can you spell that?
Come back. No, I can't spell it. R-E-D-I-V-I-V-O-U-S or something like that. Redivivus myth. There's a theory that Nero was dead and came alive again. Now here's the deal. Nero was died under somewhat secret circumstances, so that it was never a matter of public record that they had a big funeral for him, okay? So there are people out there that say, yeah, I tell you, old Nero, he's sneaky. I'll bet you he's hiding out there somewhere and he's going to come back. Now, none of you is old enough to remember what I'm about to tell you. Again, we have this great generation chasm. Not just a gap, a chasm. I understand that. Hitler. We never found Hitler's body in the bunker, did we? I'll bet he's in South America somewhere, going to come back. I heard that as a kid. I was 15 years old when World War II was over. You probably would believe it if I said World War I. So here is this swirling thing. Hitler's not really dead. He's out there hiding, and he's going to come back. You know, like he's going to come back to life. It was that kind of myth about Nero. So, some commentators suggest, therefore, that the writer here is making use of that. Is there a sense in which Domitian was Nero come back to life? Is there a sense in which that's true? I don't mean literally, but there's a sense in which Nero was a persecutor, and then the next two were not, and then Domitian brought persecution back to life, okay? So he is an eighth, which is like one of the seven. He is the one of the seven heads that has been killed and come back to life again because he's going to persecute church like Nero did, okay? And so there are those who think that is the best explanation of these two verses in chapter 13 and in chapter 17. Now, there's some things that are that would be a little bit strange if that is the case. One of them has to do with the author, with the date of the writing of Revelation. If that were true, when would the book of Revelation have been written? 5 are past, so it would not have been during the time of Nero. One is, it would be during the time of the next one, who would be Vespasian, not during Titus or Domitian. What year would that be? Well, Domitian reigned from 82 to 96. Titus reigned from 80 to 82. So that would mean that the last date it could have been written and been under Vespasian would be 79. Well, that's not too bad. What do we know? What is the best information we have about the dating of the book of Revelation? Irenaeus said that it was in circulation by, some of you wrote it in your papers, what date? 95 AD. He didn't say it was written in 95, he said it was circulated by then. Could have been written in 79 and then being circulated in 95? Well, yes. We don't know how long after John received the message that he was still on Patmos. We don't know when it was actually delivered. We don't know what happened initially of its circulation. A lot there we don't know. It's not impossible that it could have been written in 79. That's not impossible. Well, this could have generally been true, and maybe we're trying to pin it down too tightly here, but anyway, that is one of the fairly frequently discussed theories about the meaning of 5 past, one is yet to come. And then there's an 8th, which is one of the 7. So Domitian is like Nero come back to life. Persecution restarted. Which brings me back to my favorite text in Revelation, which is chapter 6, verse 9. There were some early martyrs. Those who were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus, you remember? And what does Jesus tell them? What does the Lord tell them? Take a white robe and wait, because more of your brothers. So let me take this theory now and put it in chapter 6, verse 10. All right? Those of you who've been killed by Nero are asking this question: how long is this going to go on? And I'm giving you white robe to wear, because there's going to be more. Domitian is going to come and start it all over again. Now that's not what it says. Okay, I understand that, and I would not want to push this as something that you'd have to accept, but it makes kind of an interesting story to tell, doesn't it? And so that's kind of how 5 are past, one is yet to come, would sort of fit together if we take that as the meaning of those expressions. Well, we got off on that talking about clues to who is the beast. And we said that one of the clues is 7 heads represent 7 kings. 7 heads represent 7 kings. And one of them is reigning now. So it's a worldwide empire with kings that's reigning when John writes the book. Of that we can be pretty sure. And so that's one of the clues. Revelation was written during the time of this beast. So whatever that beast is, he has to be a beast that lived at that time. They could say to be existing at that moment when the book of Revelation is being written. Well, there's not but one empire that was worldwide at that time, so that narrows it down a lot, doesn't it? The 7 heads also represent 7 hills. Why do we know about 7 hills?
Rome had 7
Rome
hills.
was built on 7 hills. Well, when you take what Daniel said, I mean, how John uses the Daniel language in Daniel 7, and you take these other clues about rules over tribes and tongues and people and nations, makes war with the church, 7 heads or 7 emperors, one of which is at this moment, the 7 heads or 7 hills. When you put all that together, I don't know how you escape saying that this beast represents the Roman Empire. I mean, it just seems to me to be so absolute. And most theories agree with that. Does Hal Lindsey agree with that? Jeremy? Say the words yes and no. Okay, that's right.
Believes it's the revived Roman Empire.
That's right. Yes, he believes it's the Roman Empire. But all the stuff he says that was going to go on during this time didn't happen during that Roman Empire. So what does he say?
That it's going to be revived.
We're going to revive the Roman. It's going to come back. The Roman Empire is going to come back. So that, yes, he says, all that points to the Roman Empire. That's exactly right. What I've told you about that, he says, exactly right. It's going to happen during the days of that empire. but it didn't happen during the old Roman Empire, and so there's going to be a new Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is going to be revived, and that revival is already afoot, and you can see it in the European common market. And this is kind of interesting. At the time he was writing that, you know, there's a big deal about in Daniel's picture of the image in chapter 2 of Daniel of the fourth kingdom has 10 toes, you know, and all this stuff. The time Lindsay started espousing this theory, there were 10 members of the European Common Market. That sounded pretty good. Of course, now they're like 23 or something, so it doesn't fit so well. Okay, so we've been trying to identify the first beast, who is the Roman Empire, and seems to be the only way to tie all this together and say that this universal political power that exists from the first century, like Daniel's fourth beast, persecutes Christians, and all that will lead us to the Roman Empire. Okay, now let's look at the second beast that he brings up. Now, remember what context we're in here. We are in the portion of Revelation. Last verse of chapter 12, Satan is going to try to stamp out the church by persecution. He's going to attack the children of the woman. And he's going to bring up as his helpers two beasts. The first beast he's going to bring up is the Roman Empire, because it's the strongest, most powerful force on earth at that time. Now you think about this for a minute. How powerful is the Roman Empire? In that day, how powerful was the Roman Empire? Had anybody been able to stand against it? Anybody been able to defeat it? Anybody been able to withstand it when it wanted to take their territory? No, couldn't withstand the Roman Empire. Its armies were victorious everywhere. I mean, it was from the Euphrates on the east all the way across Europe and into England, up to the northern part of Germany, down into Africa. I mean, this is a huge, huge, vast empire. Now, what Satan is thinking, his thought process is, how strong is the church? Well, they got some churches around. They got a few thousand members. How could they possibly stand against the Roman Empire? How in the world could they withstand the onslaught of the Roman Empire? I mean, if the empire decides to destroy them, what chance have they got? So Satan thinks, all I've got to do is to think up a way to get the Roman Empire to not like the church. If I can put them on colliding paths, the church ain't got a chance. Okay? So that's why he brings up this second beast. Now, what do you notice about this second beast? Okay, we're told that he has two horns like a lamb. You see, this lamb has this beast has two horns. You see up here, two horns. He makes him sort of beast-like looking. Some would picture him more docile, more. He's called later a false prophet. Maybe he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He doesn't look quite so ferocious. Sometimes I've pictured him as looking just, like a regular lamb with two horns. So I think this may be a little too fierce for the picture we get. But what is he set up over here? Empire? Yeah, he set up a statue of the empire. That is, what does the text say? We're back in chapter 13 now. What does the text say? He's going to go around and set up statues of the heads of the beasts. The heads of the beasts, and make people worship them. That's his plan, is to set up images of the beasts and make people worship them. That is, he's going to create emperor worship. So the second beast, 2 horns like a lamb, sets up images of the first beast. He forces worship of the first beast. He is coexistent with the first beast. He comes up with him in chapter 13. He goes down to defeat with him in chapter 19. Now, when we come back in a minute to look at other views of these, you're going to see that some views have the first beast coming up and going down, and the second beast coming up after the first beast is gone and continuing for a while. But that's really not the picture here. This picture says that the second beast works with the authority of the first beast. He sets up images of the heads of the first beast. He comes up with the first beast in chapter 13. He goes down to defeat with the first beast in chapter 19, verse 19. And so they are coexistent, not one following the other. That's important in sorting out some of these identifications of this second beast. Well, I believe this second beast represents the cult of emperor worship, those who went around setting up statues of the beast. Let me go back to Ephesus, that I talked about the other day. In Ephesus, probably early in the 2nd century, which would be well within the scope of this time frame of this book, wouldn't it? Early in the 2nd century, a huge temple is built in downtown Ephesus. Downtown, I mean right next to the marketplace. Okay. This temple was built to three Roman emperors: Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. You can go there today and see the ruins of that temple. You can see the columns that held it up. It was 3 stories high. And the place to worship was up on the top story. The altar was up on the top. It was, one guidebook that I was reading said, the building and its grounds are a football field wide and 5 football fields long. There is a museum not far from the site of that temple, a mile away or something, that has remains that have been found as they uncovered all these things. And there is in that museum a head of Domitian, probably as big as that wall there. I mean, from the bottom to the top would be 8 feet or so. I don't know how big, but huge. And it was a full body statue of him, and about all they've got is the head left. But imagine how big that whole statue would have been. Which the second beast went around and set up. You follow me? That's what he did. That's the kind of things he did. Set up images of these beasts, of these emperors, and made people worship them. And so they would come along, and they would be brought before the image, and they would be told to take a pinch of incense and put it on the altar to that emperor, now thought of as a god, and to say the words, "Caesar is Lord." The emperor is God. Now you're a Christian in the early 2nd century, and you go to the marketplace to do your business, and officials of the government come and take you and say, it's your time to go and worship the emperor. And you're taken to the feet of this huge image of Domitian. And there's an altar on which to put incense. And you're told, take the incense, put it on the altar, and say the words, "Caesar is Lord." What would you do? My children need a father. My wife needs a husband. A woman left without a husband has no way to support herself. Am I gonna do this so I can go back to my family? I mean, I can do it and not mean it in my heart, can't I? Would you begin to go through all kinds of explanations of justifying doing this? Or would you just say, I can't say those words, I don't believe that's true. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. And they would say, are you sure? Yes, in this century would say, is that your final answer? That's my final answer. And with us, off you go to jail. Off you go to be tied to the wheels of a chariot and driven through the rock streets until you're cut half in two by the wheel of that chariot. You're dipped in oil and set upon a standard and set afire, burned alive. You're taken out into an arena where there are wild animals that haven't been fed in several days, lions. And you're led out there to be eaten alive by those animals. Would you say, I'm a Christian? That's what these people were facing. And thousands and thousands and thousands of them said, I'm a Christian. Do with me what you will. And Satan thought he had won. Satan thought this can't lose. How can this not win the day? I didn't keep Jesus from doing what he came to do on earth. I didn't stop him from taking his place in heaven. I couldn't stop the plan of God. But I've killed all the Christians and nobody knows about Jesus anymore. I win. There was just one little thing wrong. When the people around saw the courage of these Christians, and saw, you remember yesterday, saw how they lived and how they died. We talked about that yesterday. Saw how they lived and how they died. They said, what is this religion? I want to know more about this. I mean, these people go out to die singing hymns to Jesus. What gives you the strength and the power to do something like that? And so they're determined to know more about it. And some Christians now are dying and more are coming to take their place, so that by the time this persecution is over, the church is vastly larger than it was to start with. And Satan lost round 4. And this book of Revelation, as I understand, is written to say to Christians, summarized best in these words from chapter 2 of Revelation. Be faithful unto death. Be faithful to the point of dying me, and I'll give you the crown of life. As I understand, that's what this book is telling these Christians, sharing with them Satan's strategy. Don't let it come true. You be faithful, even if it means you die. Now, we've seen then Satan's strategy. We've seen his plan, how he failed in attempt 1 and 2 and 3, and how he thought he could win in 4. Now, I couldn't quite prove the next sentence I'm about to make. But because they got the book of Revelation and understood it and were encouraged, they stood their ground, they held firmly, and Satan didn't win. Is that overstating it? No. We don't have direct evidence of all of that, but that's what I believe. So, we've talked about chapter 13. Now, there's another thing or two in 13 we need to talk about. Somebody read the last 2 verses in chapter 13.
And he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666.
What is 666? I don't know, let's go on. More than that, nobody knows. I'll share with you some theories, okay? I don't think anybody knows for sure what that means. But let's talk about it a little bit. What strikes me here is it's given as a clue. It's given as a clue. If you understand what 666 means, it'll help you understand what this whole thing's about. So it was something that the people of that time seemed to understand. They seemed to know what that was. The number of a man, the number is 666. Well, that tells me this. Of this I can be sure, I believe. And that is that there was something in their culture then that they understood that made this something they could catch on to that we don't have in our culture and we can't understand. Let me give you some examples of that. Again, I'm going back before your time. In World War I, even before my time, in World War I, we were fighting the Germans in the trenches, and it was very important to have some kind of password so that they could know whether somebody advancing was friend or foe, okay? So they would call out the password that had been brought down from headquarters, and the person on the other side, if they were Americans, were supposed to respond with the password, and if they didn't know the password, you shot them, okay? But the American troops found out that the Germans had spies who were able to find out what the passwords were, and so when the person advanced, he'd give the right password and turn out to be a German soldier. So they made up their own passwords. They made up things that people who grew up in America would know about, that Germans wouldn't know about. Even if they spoke English, they wouldn't know about, because they hadn't grown up over here, okay? And that would be true of any culture, you know. There'd be things in the culture that people know. And so they might pick a sports figure. They might say, who's Babe Ruth? Okay. Did he come before World War I? I don't remember. Not quite, I guess. But you see, pick something out of the culture. One of the things they picked was this question. This one really happened. Who sleeps with Maggie? Now, none of you is old enough to know the answer to that question. In this room, only I am old enough to know the answer to that question. Who sleeps with Maggie? But let me change it. Who sleeps with Blondie? Anybody remember that?
Dagwood.
Dagwood, okay. Well, Jiggs and Maggie were a couple in the comics like Blondie and Dagwood, and so who sleeps with Maggie was Jiggs. Well, that was something out of the culture, you see, and they understood the culture, and therefore understanding the culture, they knew the answer. What I'm saying to you is that 666 is something that was in their culture that they got, and we're not in that culture, and we don't get it. Okay? So I don't think there's any way to know for sure what 666 stands for. Some of the theories are, one theory is that the number 6 has a meaning in and of itself, like the number 7 does, and the number 12 does in Revelation. What does the number 7 mean? Okay, completion, perfection, okay, perfection. Where is 6 in relation to 7?
Short of perfection.
Short of perfection, exactly. So 6 became the number for failure. And so the number 666 would mean failure, failure, failure. They've got all this power, they think it's gonna work, but let me tell you, it's gonna be failure, failure, failure. That's one theory. Another theory is that a fairly common practice in those days was to substitute numbers for letters. Do we still do that today with Roman numerals? X means 10, V means 5, M means 1,000, okay? So, each Roman letter had a numerical equivalent. So it was not an unusual practice to take somebody's name and to count the numbers of it, and based on those numbers, you'd say, well, your number is 453, because that's what the letters of your name add up to. So it's kind of a game they played, all right? There's some record of a man writing to his sweetheart, and he lovingly tells her the number of her name. Well, based on that, 666 might be the number of somebody's name. It does say it's the number of a man, doesn't it? Read the last verse. Go ahead and read it, Jason.
Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast.
Now, go back to the word calculate. You hear the word calculate? Add up the numbers. Okay, go ahead.
For the number is that of a man.
The number is that of a man. There's some connection between this man and the beast. The number of the beast is really the number of a man, and you can calculate it. Okay? What could we do with that? Well, if you take the name of the Emperor Nero, there is a way in which the letters of his names add up to 666. Now, there's some who object to that and say, well, it's not the typical spelling of the name. Well, okay. But it's kind of interesting that the name of the emperor that started the persecution of Christians, that lined up the Roman Empire first against the church, was a man whose name may be calculated as 666. So that's a possibility worth thinking about. Here's another one. It means Ronald Reagan. After all, what's his full name? Ronald, R-O-N-A-L-D 6, Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N 6, R-E-A-G-A-N 6, Ronald Wilson Reagan 666.
There you have it.
Bound to be right, isn't it? 666. I mean, all kinds of things have been done for this. It's some kind of big computer in Belgium that's got 666 on it. It's the barcodes. There are all kinds of crazy theories about this. But the Nero one, I think, is of interest and is a possibility. I wouldn't press that as being the answer, but I would say that fits the way the description comes across, because the number of a man becomes the number of a beast because he is the head of the beast, you see. And you've calculated it. You've gone through the addition process. So it's kind of interesting like that. So I don't know what 66 is. We don't know for sure. It's something that was a clue to them in their culture that they connected with that we really can't be sure of. But anyway, that may be a possibility of 666. Okay. Now, anything else about chapter 13? Let me say one more thing about 13. What did those who worship the beast get?
The number?
No, not the number, but something they got.
Mark.
The mark. They got the mark of the beast. And that mark allowed them to buy and sell, trade, okay? So what is the mark of the beast? Well, we said a little bit about this yesterday. The mark of the beast is the identification of those who belong to the beast. Remember back in chapter 7, where God says, I'm going to seal those who belong to me. And later on it says that those who belong to him have the name of God written on their foreheads. And here, so the guys who are following God, the Christians, they have a mark, the name of God. Not a tattoo of Jehovah on their foreheads, okay, but symbolically they have God's name on them, and those who are on the other side have a mark on them. And so this is a way of identifying the good guys and the bad guys, the white hats and the black hats, the ones who are on God's side and those who are on the devil's side are identified by a mark. Both of them have a mark, have an identification of some kind in the story. Not literally, but in the story. Now, there's some who say, well, there really was the situation in which if you worship the beast, you got certain tokens, certain representations that you had worshipped the beast, and you had to present those in order to be able to buy and sell. Well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe it's something like that he's talking about. But somehow, those who did worship the beast were known as those who would, and those who didn't were known as those who didn't. And therein was what the devil was trying to do. Okay, that's chapter 13. Anybody got a question about 13 before we move on? Okay, now we'll come to chapter 14. Okay, here we go in chapter 14. This persecution will last for a symbolic 1,260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years. How long literally was that? Well, the persecution began under Nero, which would have been in the 60s, and then revived under Domitian, which would have been probably in the 90s. And the Romans persecuted Christians for about 200 years, until about 300 A.D. Not all emperors were as strong as others in their persecution. Some made it a fairly big priority and others did not. But the period of persecution lasted roughly from about the end of the 1st century until about the beginning of the 4th century, which is a period of about a little over 200 years. Now, 3.5 years, or 1,260 days, or 42 months, was symbolized, in terms of numbers, half of 7. So it is less than a perfect number. It's half of a perfect number, and therefore a way of signifying it's going to last for a while, but not to perfection, not completeness, not as long as it might last. So I think we would be pushing literality too far to say, well, it was going on. He said it only lasts 3.5 years, and you're trying to tell me it lasts 200 years. Well, it says it'll last 3.5 years, 1,260 days, 42 months. That's what it says. That's the symbol. That's the figurative representation. The reality is that it lasted about 200 years. Now, by the time we come to chapter 14, that time is past. The two beasts have done their dirty work. And the persecution, now, the time of that persecution has ended. So we come to chapter 14. We're told now we get a picture on Mount Zion. Mount Zion. What is Mount Zion? What literally was Mount Zion? Jerusalem. It's kind of interesting. Mount Zion moves around in Jerusalem a little bit. It first represented the Temple Mount, but then later it came to represent a mountain across the Tyropoeon Valley from the Temple Mount. And so, the place where the high priest's house was, where Jesus was taken, and things like that, later were called Mount Zion. So it represents Jerusalem and the concept of the holy city and things like that. So now, that's what it says, is Mount Zion, meaning not the old Jerusalem, but the new Jerusalem, okay? So, who is said to be there?
144,000.
The 144,000. Where do we see those before? Seventh chapter. Where were they then?
On earth.
Verse 3, chapter 7, hurt not the earth until I put my mark on my people. They were on earth then. Now where are they? How'd they get from earth to heaven? Huh? They were killed. They were martyred. So now they were on earth. God put his mark on them, identified them, protected them not from death, but from something worse than death. Now they are with him in heaven. And what are they doing in this heavenly scene?
Singing.
Who are they following? The Lamb. And what are they doing? Singing a song that nobody can sing but them. They're special. Not only that, but they're described as those who
Overcome.
would not tell a lie. How long I can spread that out.
No more.
Would not tell a lie, and did not defile themselves with women. Didn't defile themselves with women. Didn't tell a lie, wouldn't defile themselves with women. What lie were they tempted to tell? I'm not a Christian. Yeah. Are you a Christian? Me? No, I'm not a Christian. They were tempted to tell that lie, weren't they? Defile themselves with women. Well, if you ask yourself, what might that mean other than a literal defiling yourself, committing literal fornication? If you ask yourself, is there another possible meaning of that? What would that be? In the Old Testament, what is often pictured as adultery?
Idolatry.
Idolatry. Being unfaithful to God and running off with another woman, another god, you see. So, it seems interesting to me here that the two descriptive phrases are, they wouldn't tell a lie, and they wouldn't run off with another god, okay? I'm reading into that a little bit, I understand, but I think that fits who they are. They wouldn't defile themselves with women. They wouldn't tell a lie. They kept themselves truly, faithfully to Christ as their Lord, and they didn't hide it. They weren't ashamed of it. They confessed it, even though it meant they would be killed, and that's how they got from earth to heaven, was admitting that they were Christians. Okay. That's how chapter 12 begins. Now, we're going to take a break. It's 5:15, break time. We will take a 15-minute break now until 5:30. We're going to go until a 6:45. This is Wednesday night, church night, so I'll give you time to get reconnected for church. So we'll go then from 5:30 for an hour and 15 minutes. Rather than usually an hour and a half. Go for an hour and 15 minutes and be through at 6:45. Okay?
sure didn't expect that.
Let's see, I still need this one. One that I was in, yes, I'm on number 4. It will, in fact, it'll take me through the rest of this lesson.
Okay?
Take me through the rest of this.
You can just do whatever you want.
Okay, that's good, that's good. Well, you're a big help, I really appreciate it.
Not bad, I didn't get that going.
Well, I don't know what more will happen to it.
We'll try a thing or two right here.
Well, I'm gonna run upstairs a minute.
Let's start again.
Okay, guys, get your 5-column sheets out, all right? And look to chapters 12 to 14. Should be one here. Next one here somewhere. See where it is right now. Here it is. 12 to 14. We're going to track, we've done that. We didn't go quite through all of 14, but we got into 14. So now let's go back and look at other views of those chapters. Okay, let's take the Hines view first. And he says that the woman is the true apostolic church. The true apostolic church. So he says it's the church. Now what characteristic of the woman would you say would throw that into some question?
She gave birth to
She
Christ.
gave birth to Christ. The church doesn't give birth to Christ, you see. So it makes a beautiful picture. I mean, you can show that picture and think of all the wonderful things you can say about the church by looking at that picture, but I just don't think that is going to work very well. Then the child is Constantine's recognition of the church. Now remember, this is the one that everything that happens is going to be the next event in history. You see? And boy, I mean, he follows that right down the line. Now, a problem with that view, with that general view, however, is that not all of those who hold that view make the same list of historical events. One of them will say, well, this represents one thing in history, and the other say it represents something else. So they do not have very, very good consistency on what they say these historical events are. But Hines is very consistent in that he takes one event after another and makes these things to represent that. So that's the true apostolic church. The child is Constantine's recognition of the church, and the church increases. Then the dragon is pagan Rome. Dragon is the Roman Empire. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't want to be too dogmatic about anything in Revelation, but if anything I'd feel dogmatic about, it'd be who is the dragon, because in 2 verses it tells us plainly, doesn't it? So I'd have to differ with that. The 1260 days, as we said before, 533, the beginning of the Catholic Church, the 1793, the French Revolution. The problem with that is there's no particular reason. There's nothing in the 1260-day description that would cause you to think it has something to do with those 2 events. It's always a time of persecution of the church. The first beast is Rome, which he says starts out with a union of church and state. And then the second beast is papal Rome. What does that mean, papal Rome? In other words,
Catholic Church.
the Roman Catholic Church. He says that the second beast represents the Roman Catholic Church. Now, Let's examine that a little bit. For the first beast to be Rome, and the second beast to be the Roman Catholic Church, what relationship has to exist between those two?
Same time, coexistence.
Yeah, we studied that they both are at the same time, but in this case, that one would come before the other, wouldn't it? The Roman Empire falls, and the Roman Catholic Church comes up next. So that doesn't fit what we said before very well, does it? Going on down his list, 666, he says, represents Latinos, the father of the Latin race, which stands for the Latin Church. Some even say that you know the words inscribed on the Pope's mitre in Latin? Vicarius filii Dei, in the place of the Son of God. Dei, Dios, you hear? Vicarius filii Dei. If you take that and put it in Roman numerals, some say you come up with the number 666. So anyway, he makes that to be connected with the Latin Church. 144,000 in heaven, the glory of the redeemed, the angel that's going to come. We haven't quite come to that in chapter 14 yet, preaching the Reformation movement. Here we are back to John Calvin and Martin Luther. And Babylon is fallen. The Catholic Church, it has lost its complete hold, but it can continue in a reduced state. Babylon has fallen, and he says Babylon means Roman Catholic Church. Okay, let's go back and look at another of these views. Hendrickson. Now, before we look at this, what is going to characterize Hendrickson's view?
Principles over continual principles.
Yeah, generalities. Okay, generalities. Well, if that's what it means, that's what it means. That's okay. But I just want you to get the flavor of these views. You see, the flavor of the views. Hendrickson says the woman is the church, the Old and New Testament. That is God's people. The woman represents God's people. That is the Old Testament people of God brought into being the Christ who became the leader of the New Testament people of God. Well, I can buy that. No. Didn't see. The Old Testament people of God brought Christ to us, okay? But then you get down to saying, how are the people of God, the mother of the people of God? When you get down to, she is the church, the witnesses are her offspring. The child is Christ. The dragon is Satan. The 1260 days is the Christian age. Hendrickson, now is going to have, he goes through Revelation 7 times, first to second coming, and so that is the Christian age, and so the 1260 days is the Christian age, the whole Christian age. First beast, persecuting power of Satan through nations. Roman Empire, no, but something like the persecuting of the Roman Empire that occurs over and over and over and over and over. See? Very consistent about that. This general look of persecution of God's people. And the first beast does it from a political power, and the second beast does it as a religious power, false religions that are going to persecute the church. So they're both persecutors of the church. I'd agree with that. Not specifically any one particular persecutor, just false religion and political powers that persecute the church. Hendrickson's view. Then 666, he says, represents Nero. Well, we studied that possibility, didn't we? The 144,000 martyrs redeemed from the earth, now in heaven. Okay. The angels. we haven't quite come to this in chapter 14. We'll go back to that in a minute. Angels that are announcing things. He calls gospel emissaries the expansion of Christianity, and the souls are his angels. And then in Babylon, fallen is Jerusalem, he says. No, sorry, I'm in the wrong column. Messengers of God, the angels, and in Babylon, the world is the center of seduction. So Babylon to him is the seduction of the false religions of the world. False religions of the world. Okay. Now let's go back to Wallace's view, Jerusalem view. The woman is the church of Christ. Okay? Well, look at these. Look across Hines, the church, Hendrickson, the church, Wallace, the church. There's some consistency there. Lindsay's going to say it represents Israel, people of God. So you'll have to weigh those against the one I gave you. Wallace, the church of Christ. The child represents martyred saints. I don't know how he makes that. I can see how some of them makes these connections. I can't see how that one works. The dragon is Satan, but personified in the persecuting powers of Nero and his successors. So he also makes the dragon to be something other than Satan, or beyond Satan plus, we might say. The 1260 days, the siege of Jerusalem. First beast, the Roman Empire. Second beast, Jewish persecutors. They're instruments of Roman power. Then, on the back, Nero is the sixth head. The martyrs redeemed from the earth, 144,000. Angels, the gospel emissaries, expansion of Christianity, and Babylon is Jerusalem. So he makes everything. Babylon, the harlot, second beast, all of these things end up tied with Jerusalem. Now look at Lindsay. The woman represents Israel. The 12 stars representing the 12 children of Israel, the 12 patriarchs. The child is Christ. The dragon is Satan. He's cast out. 1260 days is the last half of the 7 years of tribulation. The first beast is the Roman Antichrist. And the second beast is the Jewish Antichrist. Now let me dwell on that just a little bit. I don't want to get into that too long because we're going to get into that in great detail on Friday. Lindsay has the idea of Antichrist. There is an Antichrist. And on Friday we're going to talk about that. Does the Bible ever use the word Antichrist?
Yes.
How many times?
I think I would.
Actually, four verses, all in 1st and 2nd John, uses the word Antichrist. So on Friday, we're going to talk about what does John mean when he uses the word Antichrist. Is he talking about some great political ruler that's going to lead the world in World War III? Is that what John is discussing in 1st and 2nd John? Or was there something else that he had in mind when he uses the word Antichrist? Some who believe in Antichrist think there'll be one Antichrist, only one Antichrist. Lindsay believes there'll be two. After all, the two beasts, aren't there? Two Antichrists. Roman Antichrist that rises out of the European Common Market, Jewish Antichrist that rises out of the World Council of Churches. So he foresees the time when there will be a one-world government led by the Roman Antichrist and a one-world religion led by the Jewish Antichrist. So it's going to come out of the World Council of Churches. Now, the fact that the Jews are not admitted as a religion in the World Council of Churches doesn't seem to bother him. But he says, well, they'll be admitted someday. So he has those two that are going to conspire together to do things, rebuild the Jewish temple and all this kind of stuff. And so those are, that's his view about Antichrist, that these two beasts represent two Antichrists, Roman Antichrist, Jewish Antichrist, that shall rise in the last days, and they're going to conspire together. Now, if you've read Left Behind, anything in that series Left Behind, which is popular these days, in the first book, there's several, there's I think 11 books in that series. And I've only read the first one. My understanding is, however, that if the story of the last days lasts this long, the first book tells all of that, but it puts the emphasis on the first phase over here. The next book tells it all, but it puts emphasis on the next phase. And the third book tells it all, but it puts emphasis on this phase, and so on like that. So even in the first book, they talk about an Antichrist. And their view of the Antichrist is, I believe he's from some small European country. I believe it's Romania. And he comes to the UN. Man, he is so charismatic. And he is so winning. And he's so captivating that all the other countries just say, why don't you take us over? I mean, we like you so much. Will you be our leader too? And all the nations of the world just submit to this captivating guy from Romania. And it turns out he's the Antichrist and leads the world into World War II. Now I have a little trouble with that scenario. I mean, here in the United States, we can't even decide for sure who our next president is going to be without a fairly long struggle. And to think that we would just run against somebody and say, oh, you must be it, why don't you take us over? Sounds a little far-fetched to me, but that's the idea of this Antichrist that's going to become the ruler of the world, the one world government. And the Jewish Antichrist, one world religion. Seems to me there's more dividing going on among religions than unifying among religions. But anyway, all the religions are going to say that this one, take us over, we'll be part of your religion. And then those two will conspire to do things that will bring the events that bring everything to an end. So that's kind of the scenario that he paints about the two Antichrists, the Roman Antichrist and the Jewish Antichrist. Now, I mentioned the other day that he makes the 144,000. You see it here on your sheet. The Roman Antichrist sets up an image of himself in the temple. And 144,000 Jews that have become believers and are evangelists escape from him by being airlifted by helicopter to Petra. That's what he says. The Jewish Antichrist, and that the mark of the beast is Social Security numbers or some other kind of identifying number, that everybody will have a number and you'll be known by your number, and somehow that will put you under the control of this second Antichrist. Then he says that the number 6 represents humanity, man trying to imitate the Trinity. So the 3 6s in one person, humanity, 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 represents the Antichrist. That's the number of the Antichrist. Have you seen these movies with somebody who's got 666 on his forehead and all that kind of stuff? 144,000 of the Jewish evangelists miraculously preserved until the end of the tribulation judgment. So he says that in Matthew 25, there is this judgment where Jesus says, you fed me when I was hungry and clothed me when I was naked and all that stuff, that judgment scene. And that that is a judgment based on how people treated the 144,000 during the time of tribulation. How did you treat these Jewish evangelists? Did you feed them when they were hungry? Did you clothe them when they were naked? Did you visit them when they were in prison? And the judgment, that judgment is, Matthew 25, he says, takes place 1,000 years before the judgment of Revelation 20 and the great white throne judgment. He separates those by 1,000 years. And it says the first one is based on how you treated the Jewish Antichrist. The Jewish evangelists. Okay, then Babylon is Rome rebuilt. Jeremy, what are we talking about? The revival of
The Roman Empire.
Roman Empire. See, there we are again. Revival of the Roman Empire. Babylon, Rome, is going to be rebuilt. And it first represents a religious system, and then in the second half it represents the rebuilt city at the end of the second 3.5 years. Okay. Well, that's the story of how these various tracks view these things. And again, I want to emphasize the consistency they take in their position. Hines starts down, everything is one more event in history, and there's successive events, and he connects them with that. And Hendrickson is dealing with generalities. It's not Rome, it's not one specific persecution, it's persecution by any governmental agency. And the second beast is not emperor worship, it's any kind of false religion, anywhere, anytime. So these opposing forces, wherever Christ is preached, wherever the white horse rides forth, Christ rides forth, these obstacles are going to arise. So that's kind of how they are consistent through these various things. And of course, Wallace with the tying everything to Jerusalem, and Lindsay tying everything to the second coming, the events preceding and including the second coming and following the second coming. Okay, now let's go back to chapter 14, and we'll look at that a little bit. Persecution is over. The martyrs are now in heaven. They're following the Lamb wherever he goes, singing the song that nobody can sing but them. Then in verse 8, an angel comes announcing, fallen is Babylon. So what is Babylon? What is Babylon? Well, remember we talked the other day about the harlot? And on her head was a band with words on it. Mother of harlots, Babylon the Great. The harlot's name is Babylon. Or her name is Babylon. How did we identify the harlot the other day? Who was the harlot?
City of Rome.
City of Rome. And we got that from several things, and we'll come to that again when we get to chapter 17, but the last verse of chapter 17 describes the harlot as the city that rules over the kings of the world. And in 2 or 3 verses earlier that, it says she rules over tribes and tongues and people and nations, just like it says about the first beast. She sits on 7 hills. All these identifying. So we said she was the city of Rome. And so Babylon here represents, I think, not a rebuilt city of Babylon over there in Iraq, but is a code name for Rome. And there is evidence. Peter refers to Rome as Babylon, it seems, in one of his letters. And others writing at that time use that name to refer to Rome. So it seems like that is a fairly well-known expression. And in our storyline, think about it. Where are we in the story? Remember, instead of making the list of the five approaches that we had on the syllabus, we changed that first thing this morning, this afternoon, when we said, instead of that, I want you to write the storyline of the book, not the figures, but the story that comes out of the figures. So where are we in that storyline? Well, what do we see at the beginning of chapter 14? The martyrs are where? In heaven, which means the persecution is over. So what's God going to do after the persecution is over? Well, what's it say on the screen? Falkland's Babylon. He's going to bring Babylon down to defeat. The persecutor is going to come down. He's going to defeat the persecutor. Fallen is Babylon. The announcement of the fall. It hasn't happened yet. We're going to go through a period of describing how it's going to take place. But the announcement comes, fallen is Babylon. Fallen is Babylon. Now, there's some other things that follow that verse. Somebody read for me Revelation 14:8 through about 10 or 12.
And another angel, a second one, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. Then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger.
Okay, stop right there. To what is Babylon connected in those verses?
First beast.
The first beast and the persecution of Christians, you see. That's a pretty tight connection with who Babylon is. Go ahead. Read some more.
And he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of his holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day and night. Those who worship the beast and his image and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, Right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow with them.
Okay. Now what have we got put in contrast there?
The martyrs and those who worship the
The martyrs and those who worship the beast. And those who worship the beast, what's going to happen to them?
be destroyed.
Well, destroyed in a sense, but even worse than that, they're going to be tormented forever, always in this discomfort. While those who were faithful to Christ, what's going to happen to them? They shall have rest from their labors. They're going to be in a good place. The followers of the beast are going to be in a bad place. Okay? We're going to see that some more later on. But so he's announcing the fall. He's saying, okay, it's time for the beast to be over. We need to get rid of the beast and the followers of the beast and let that torment begin. And those who have been faithful and have confessed their faith in Christ and followed him and have gone through this terrible day, good things now are in store for them. Okay, now this same idea is pictured in several ways. Go ahead, Jeremy, read some more.
Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud. And sitting on the cloud was one like a son of man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another...
Okay, hold on. Who do you think would be one that looks like a son of man? With a golden crown on his head.
Jesus.
That's going to be Jesus. All right, go ahead.
And another angel came out of the temple, crying out with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. Then he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, and he also had a sharp sickle. Then another angel, the one who has power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called out with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, Put in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because their grapes are ripe. So the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth, and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles.
Okay? Pretty strong language, isn't it? What's it got to do with? How is it introduced?
Jesus coming in judgment.
Yeah. Judgment on
The beast, the Roman
the
Empire.
persecutor, the one who's been harming his people. And the ones who've been worshiping the beast are going to suffer this. And so, fallen is Babylon, and other ways of saying that is, he's going to wield his sickle, cut them down, and he's going to put them in the winepress and squeeze them until the blood runs out. And how much blood is going to come out?
Enough to fill up his horse's bridles.
All right? How high is a horse's bridle? See? Horse. His bridle comes up, so high. And it's going to be, the blood's going to be so high that it's almost going to be over your head. Lindsay takes that literally. That's the Battle of Armageddon. When those 300 million soldiers are over there, so many of them are getting killed and bleeding that the blood gets as high as the horses' bridles. We can talk about that on Friday. I hope you're getting excited about Friday. Okay. So, anyway, all this is, I believe, is figurative, is a way of, you see, that the writer of this is a marvelous dramatist. This is the build-up, this is the lead-up to this big event of the fall of Babylon. And he whets your appetite. Says it's going to be like they've been put in a wine press and squeezed until the blood runs out. And all these figures of cutting down the grapes and all that. These are just ways of heightening the anticipation. Now, you remember how chapter 11 closed? How did chapter 11 close? What was the mood in heaven?
Joy, because they pronounce
Joy, because God is now going to destroy the one who's been destroying. God is now ready to make his move, and they're all happy about it. Now, we said that the second act, starting in chapter 12, is going to overlap a little of where that one ended. So we're coming now to sort of the same place where we ended chapter 11, with the announcement of the fall of the persecutor, and here we are in chapter 14, announcing the fall of the persecutor. Now, look at what's happened. In chapter 11, the witnesses, chapter 11, the witnesses are going to testify for how long? Chapter 11, verse 5 or 6, somewhere there. The witnesses are going to testify for how long? How long?
42 months.
42 months, okay? So, at the end of 11, we've got this 42-month period. You got it? In chapter 12, it says that the woman's going to be protected for 3.5 years. So in chapter 12, we've got this same period. In chapter 13, the beast is going to make war on the saints for 42 months. This same period. See? All of these are not describing different periods of 42 months. It's all the same period. It's just we've got a little overlap here. And so, so we've got that period has taken place. And now that being over, we're ready for Babylon to fall. That's where we were at the end of 11. That's where we are as we move through 14. These various ways in which the fall of Babylon is pictorially described to whet your appetite. Now, so in 14, fallen is Babylon. Now we come to chapter 15. Chapter 15. Chapter 15, we see back into the throne room of God, which we described in chapter 4, where this story is playing out. And what do we see there? Well, we see some people, and what are they doing? People, maybe I should say souls. We see some personalities there. What are they doing? Where are they?
Around the throne of God.
They're around the throne. What else is there to be seen?
Standing on the sea.
Standing by the crystal sea. Various translations do different descriptions there. It means that it is some call it the sea of glass, meaning it's just smooth on the surface. See, no wind. That's proof that's not in Oklahoma. There's no wind on the sea. It's perfectly calm sea. And these are standing around. And how are these standing around identified? What identifying mark do they have?
Seven angels. Is that what we're looking at?
No, not yet. Not 7 angels yet. That's,
I'm in 15, I guess.
I think that's 16.
Number of his name.
How are these people standing around the water? How are they described? And what are they doing?
Holding harps and singing.
They're singing songs. What song do they sing?
Song of Moses.
Song of Moses and the Lamb. Song of Moses and the Lamb. And they're called those who came off Find the word beast in there anywhere?
Victorious over the beast.
Ah, they came off victorious over the beast. Who are these guys?
They're the overcomers.
They're the overcomers. They're the martyrs. They're the ones we've seen. They're back in chapter 6, verse 9. They were there, the early ones. Chapter 7, the ones in they got the white robe. Chapter 7, they're serving before the throne of God in their white robes. Chapter 7, we've got 144,000 on earth, but by chapter 14, those 144,000 are now in heaven. The ones who wouldn't lie and they wouldn't commit, they didn't defile themselves with women. And now here they are again. And they're described as those who came off victorious over the beast. Well, didn't the beast kill them? Didn't the beast kill them? Well, then the beast won the victory. Huh? Isn't that right? I mean, if the beast killed them, then the beast won, right?
They
You're
get the
shaking
crown of
your heads,
life.
but you're not saying very much.
They end up with the crown.
They won the victory. Well, friends, that's just one more place in the book of Revelation that tells us that dying is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Remember earlier we talked about Christians live in the land of okay? Well, it was tough for them to give up their lives. It was hard. I don't want to minimize that for a minute. It would put all of us in a real difficult spot to face that kind of persecution. But those who faced it and were faithful came off victorious over their persecutors. And now they are singing the song of Moses and the Lamb. They're enjoying the fruits of their victory. They came off victorious over the beast. They have won the victory. Now remember, you are in Ephesus right now, okay? Can you put yourself in Ephesus right now? And one morning an elder stands up and says, we've just received a letter from Christ given to us by John. I want to read to you what he says, and he's reading along here, and you're getting it. There's going to be persecution. There's going to be bad persecution. A lot of us are going to get killed. But in the end, we're going to win a victory. If we're faithful unto death, if we're overcomers, we're going to win the victory. And that comes back over and over and over again in this book. And well, it should. That's the purpose of the book, is to get them ready for what's coming. So, these gathered around the throne sing the song of Moses and the Lamb, and they're identified as those who came off victorious over the beast. Well, let's move on to chapter 16. In chapter 16, we are introduced to 7 more angels. And what are these angels carrying?
Bowls of wrath.
Bowls of wrath. You see them pictured on the screen, bowls of wrath. They're carrying bowls, and in each bowl is a plague. In each bowl is a plague. Well, what have we had before? We started out with 7. First group of 7 was 7 seals. Then we had 7 trumpets. Now we've got 7 bowls. Okay? These are ways of unfolding the story. The 7th seal brought in 7 trumpets. So the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets go in the first half. And then in the second half, we've got the pouring out of the 7 bowls of wrath. Now, based on chapter 14, what we learned in chapter 14, what would you guess the 7 bowls are going to be about? What do you think?
All of Rome.
Fall of Rome. Okay? That's what's been introduced. That's what the buildup has been. If that's not coming, we've been deceived, haven't we? So we got the buildup about it. And the martyrs are in heaven, pictured there, waiting, anticipating this great event. And here come the angels with 7 bowls of wrath poured out. Okay. Now listen carefully. I'm going to summarize. First of all, the first 4 bowls. Now think, there's hardly any substitute for thinking when you study the Bible. Now think, the first bowl is poured out on the land. And all those who worship the beast break out in grievous sores. The second bowl is poured out on the sea, and it turns to blood, and everything in it dies. The third bowl is poured out on the rivers, and they turn to blood. And someone standing by says, that's good enough for them. They shed the blood of the saints, and now all they've got to drink is blood. And evidently with bad consequences. The fourth bowl is poured out on the sun, and the sun becomes very hot, and the people blaspheme God because of the heat. Have you thought about that a little? See any connections? What connections do you see?
The warnings.
The first seals that were opened, the 1/3 destruction, no.
Not seal, but trumpet.
Or trumpet.
Trumpet. First trumpet was blown, and 1/3 of the land burned up. Second trumpet blown, 1/3 of the sea turned to blood. Third trumpet blown, and 1/3 of the rivers were turned bitter. The fourth trumpet is blown, and 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars were darkened. Here,
It's all,
what do we have affected?
it's all,
Same four things, but it's, say it again,
it's all.
it's all, not a third anymore, is it?
Right.
Now it's all of it. If a third meant warning, what does all mean?
Complete.
Complete destruction. You got it? So, land, sea, rivers, and sky, God is going to use the forces that He started out to be warnings. He is now going to use to bring total destruction to the beast. Now, notice some things carefully here. The first bowl is poured out on the land, and who breaks out with grievous sores?
Those who worship the beast.
Those who worship the beast. Against whom are these directed?
Rome.
Now let's don't miss this as we go along. The first bowl is poured out, and the ones affected are the ones who worship the beast. Well, if we've been right all along about who the beast is, there's not much doubt against whom these plagues are directed. Is they're going to be directed against the Roman Empire and the citizens, the people in the Roman Empire that have been a part of this emperor worship scheme. The second bowl is poured out on the sea, and everything in it dies. It doesn't say specifically who they are. But the third one says, poured out in the rivers, and an observer says, it's good enough for them because they did what?
They shed the blood.
Shed the blood of the saints. Against whom are these plagues directed?
The persecutors.
The persecutors. Now, maybe there's some other way to look at that, but that seems pretty clear and plain to me. The fourth bowl is poured out on the sun, and it becomes very hot. And these people show what they think about God. What do they think about God? What do?
Blasphemy.
Blaspheme God. Whose side are they on? Well, they're on the against God side, okay? Now, let me ask you something else about this one. They blaspheme God. There are many people who associate these plagues, these pouring out of the bowls, with the end of time. Are people going to blaspheme God at the end of time?
No.
What does the Bible say?
Every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess.
Philippians 2. Every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Christ is Lord, that God is Lord, and Christ is Lord of the glory of God the Father. So I don't think this is end of time. This is not the end of the world. This is an end, okay? What's it the end of? Roman Empire. And again, God is using the same means to destroy Rome that He used to warn Rome. The first four warnings were from natural disasters, land, sea, rivers, and sky. And now we have those same four forces, land, sea, river, and sky, in the first four bowls. But now it's not 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Now it is total, which means that God is going to use natural disasters to help bring down the Roman Empire. If you read any good history of the Roman Empire, Gibbon's Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, or whoever, any good history, you'll find that natural disasters were a major force. Earthquakes were a big thing in the fall of Rome. city of Rome was afflicted by earthquakes and floods and fires. We mentioned the volcanic eruption and the flood in Ostia and all kinds of natural disasters were a force, not the total reason, but were a factor in the fall of the city of Rome and the Roman Empire. Natural disasters. Well, just look around today, friends. People in Iowa are having a bad natural disaster, aren't they? And that can be very devastating. We're praying that it will be no worse than it has to be under these circumstances. But natural disasters were a factor in the fall of the Roman Empire. So these first four bowls suggest not partial but total disaster, not warnings but a total end, one means of which is natural disasters. Okay, now we come to the, I'm going to talk you through these, then we're going to go back and hit the PowerPoint, okay? The fifth bowl is poured out on the, somebody read it for me. Fifth bowl is poured out on the,
Throne of the beast.
say it louder,
Throne of the beast.
throne of the beast. I ask you once again, against whom are these plagues directed? You can't miss it. The throne of the beast, and what happens to the throne of the beast? It is turned dark. It's turned dark. Darkness. Well, let me ask you, what happens to a nation when the leadership of the nation turns dark? As we might say, turns to the dark side. When the nation becomes immoral. When the nation becomes corrupt, when its leadership has no moral standards by which it operates. What has always happened to such nations in the history of the world? They've gone down. Always have, always will. There's just something innate about them. That nations that are immoral, you know, back to the fall of communism in Russia. Here is a godless, immoral system that puts people in jail for opposing it, puts people in jail for minor infractions, kills people by the millions. Stalin, you know, killed them by the millions. I just don't believe a nation like that is going to last for long. God won't let it happen. And here he says this nation's leadership has become dark. They've become immoral and corrupt. You read some of the histories of these Roman emperors. They were just, you can't imagine all the sexual immorality, all of the debauchery, all of the feasting and the drunkenness and all this kind of stuff was going on. Their entertainment was watching people kill each other. Their entertainment was watching the lions eat the Christians. Just all kinds of immorality. Divorce was high. Homosexuality was high. All kinds of things were happening like that. And that was a factor in the fall of Rome. Read Gibbons, read anybody that writes about this. I don't remember many things that I did when I was a college student. I became a college freshman in 1946. How many years ago would that be? Is that 62 years ago? That's amazing. I'm only 65 and 62 years ago. Okay. I remember taking freshman speech. And in freshman speech, I gave a speech about the United States. And I said that the United States was headed down the wrong path morally. This is 1946. was headed down the wrong path morally, and if we didn't watch out, it would happen to us like it did to the Roman Empire when they got immoral, and I didn't know anything about the book of Revelation. That's just good history about the Roman Empire. And because of my speech, it got a little worse in the United States. So, the fifth bowl suggests God is going to have the effects of its immorality come to pass. And remember, the fifth trumpet was blown, it was the locusts came out, and those from a bad source hurt the bad people. And that we said was evil against itself, consequences of its own immorality. And here we've got the same thing in the fifth bowl that's poured out. Okay? Now let's get the sixth bowl poured out. The sixth bowl poured out. The sixth bowl is poured out on the Euphrates River. Remember? Sixth trumpet. Sixth bowl is poured out in the Euphrates River. And what does it do to the Euphrates River? Dries it up. Dries it up. So that armies can march across. Remember, before it was the Euphrates and 200 million soldiers were waiting to come across. So that was for partial destruction. Now it's for total destruction. And so here are these the Euphrates drying up, symbolically meaning that Rome is going to be attacked from the outside, from beyond its borders, not just from its eastern border, but all of its borders. Going to be attacked. And so, if I had to rank the causes of Rome's fall in order, probably the attacks of the Goths and the Huns and the Visigoths and the Vandals would come as certainly a prime reason for their fall, the immediate reason, although the immorality they had was an underlying cause of a lot of this. But these tribes, that kind of uncivilized tribes would come in and attack, and they would sack a city and carry off its people as prisoners and devastate the city and plunder it and all these things. And so that happened. And it even eventually happened in the city of Rome itself. So, in these six bowls that are being poured out, God is saying, the time has come for Rome to be gone. Babylon's fall. The one who's been doing all the destroying, it's time for it to be destroyed. It's time for the sickle of God to cut the wicked one down and put it in the wine press until the blood comes, like pressing out the grapes, the blood comes out and goes as high as the horse's bridles. All these are figures to suggest it's time, the time has come. God is now bringing to pass what he promised, that the persecuting power will be destroyed. Now, the first six bowls suggest the initiation of the process. Not the final completion of it, but the initiation of the process of its coming to a fall. Now, this has comprised the first 12 verses of the sixth chapter. I want us to take a look now at our chart. That's where we're going to end this lesson today, but I want us to look at our chart and kind of see what others have said about all of this. So let's go to the chart and look at that and put it with what I've told you now alongside what these others are saying, and be checking out what you think is a good way to look at all of this. Okay, find the page that says chapters 15 and 16. You have that one? Pages 15 and 16. Hines says that all of these attacks, all of these bowls are attacks on the papacy. Now remember, what has Hines done? Well, he's taken us through the various stages of the Roman Empire. He's taken us through the various stages of the Muslims coming. He's taken us through the rise of the Catholic Church. He's taken us through the Dark Ages. He's taken us through the time of the Reformation movement. And now, historically, see, he's been moving right along, and now where are we in time? Well, we're now in about 1800, somewhere. And so, here is he says that the first bowl is the French Revolution. The French Revolution. And so this is going to be something. See, the Roman Catholic Church was not just a religious power, it was a political power, wasn't it? In these days, it was a strong political power. One of the most amazing paintings that's ever been done is in the Louvre in Paris. This painting is as big as that wall over there. I mean, it's a huge, huge, huge painting. It is a painting of the Pope coming to crown Napoleon. See, any great ruler in those days would want the approval of the Catholic Church, and so the Pope came to crown Napoleon. And Napoleon took the crown out of the hands of the Pope and put it on himself. And this is a big portrait of Napoleon crowning himself in the presence of the Pope. So, the papacy was big politically in those days. So Hines is saying that here are some things that weakened the control of the papacy in political matters. Okay, French Revolution had some effect on the control, the effect, the power of the papacy, because they were for freedom and they were for casting off things that had held them back. The second bowl, the sea turns to blood, is naval war between the French and the British, 1793 to 1815. After all, when the ships attacked each other, didn't blood go into the sea? I wouldn't say it exactly turned the whole sea to blood, but you see the connection, okay? Third bowl is wars around rivers, 1792 to 1805. And the fourth bowl, the sun that was bright, that scorches men, was Napoleon. Yeah, that's what came next in order of history, and so that's what he ties in. Well, we'll go on down through some more of his. The fifth bowl is Napoleon reduces the power of the Pope and seizes Rome. So he has thrown the power of the beast, who is the Pope, the papacy, into darkness. Euphrates dries up so armies can cross, is the decline of Turkish power, which was over toward the Euphrates River. Well, that's as far as we're going on that. Finished with the sixth bowl. So that was how Hines sees all this, and you see how he lines up one historical event after the other, and you can see there's some kind of connection with those, and that's how he lines it up. As I've said so many times, if you start with certain presumptions, then, let me just add that, we're all that way. I mean, I come to the Bible with certain presuppositions. These are not presuppositions I just made up. I come with the presupposition that it's the Word of God. And so I interpret it because in a way that says this is God's message to me. And that affects how I interpret it. If I came to it believing that it was not inspired, I draw different conclusions. So what I'm trying to say is the importance of presuppositions. I don't mean presuppositions in the sense that you just assume things or you have no basis to your presuppositions. I'm saying the things with which we come to the Bible make a lot of difference about how we interpret it. Okay, let's go back now to see the next one. Let's look at Hendrickson on the first bowl. Hendrickson is going to have this as judgment on persecutors of all ages. Well, that's very consistent with his view, isn't it? The beast was the two beasts were the persecutors of all ages, and here comes the punishment on persecutors of all ages. Ulcers and disease, as on Herod. Remember Herod Antipas, I think, that died of worms in Caesarea. These persecutors are going to have ulcers and disease like Herod did. The sea is going to be an instrument of destruction. The rivers are going to be used to punish persecutors, and the sun is going to scorch wicked people. And then it will be fifth bowl is Satan's throne, not the throne of the beast, but the throne of Rome, but the throne of Satan's throne. Through the work of imperial agents in Palestine is brought to, God's wrath on all anti-Christian governments, Assyria, Babylon, Rome. Satan's sixth bowl, Satan's battle against great odds. So he makes it to be something that is related to the general theme of persecution, as God's going to bring all of them to an end. Wallace says these are all represented by the final fall of Jerusalem. We've had all this build up, and finally Jerusalem is going to fall. So the Jewish idolaters bring grievous times, complete dissolution of the emperor beast and his subjects, epidemics of deadly disease on inhabitants of Jerusalem because the water supply goes bad and all this. Punishment of the persecutors, the end of activities of the emperors and his colleagues. Fifth bowl, Satan's throne, through the work of imperial agents in Palestine is brought to an end. All the deterrents to the invasion of Judea are taken away. That is, the Euphrates dries up so all the soldiers can come. And so all this is built up to the fall of Jerusalem. And Lindsay says this is built up for the climax of the final battle, which is Battle of Armageddon, which comes up in the next part of chapter 16. So he says the sores breaking out are the result of radioactive pollution that's come from the atomic wars that have been going on. And oceans will die as a result of nuclear exchange. The sea turning to blood means that they become contaminated with nuclear fallout. The rivers turn to blood. There's no water left to drink. All you'll have to drink is Coca-Cola, he says, because there won't be any water to drink. Global heat wave. Here we are. I guess Al Gore's right. We're going to have a heat wave here. This fourth bowl, the sun is going to get bright. That's global warming. And then in the fifth bowl, the actual darkness in Rome to cover the movements of the Chinese. And the sixth bowl is the final coming of the 200 million Chinese to Israel. Okay. Well, I want you to get the flavor of all of these now. See the flavor. Make your decisions about which seems to be closest to the meaning of the text. Let me say just a word now about tomorrow. Tomorrow we begin with the middle of chapter 16, and we will talk about Armageddon and the harlot, and the end of the harlot and the 1,000 years, the New Jerusalem. All that will come tomorrow. And you need to be you need to be doing two things now. You need to be working on a paper that tells the underlying story of the book of Revelation. You know, we've talked about this is what it says and this is what it means. And so I want you to write something that says, it starts out with Jesus opening the seals to tell the story. And the four horsemen come and they represent that. That means God's power to deal with the affairs of nations. And then arises the question of when is God going to do something? So you're telling that story, you see. You're telling that story. So you need to be working on that, and we'll discuss that some tomorrow. If you could start on that a little bit tonight to get the feel of it, then you may have some questions about that you want to ask tomorrow. So I don't mean you have to finish it tonight, but if you start on it and then you say, I'm not quite sure how to do this, you can ask some questions about it tomorrow, okay? And then you need to be thinking about the final exam. Don't wait until about 1 o'clock on Friday to start getting ready for the final exam. So be getting yourself ready for that. Look at the objectives of the course. Look at the things I've told you that are going to be on the final exam. I'm going to ask you on the final exam to tell this story of the book of Revelation from beginning to end. Just, take a page or whatever and tell the story of what's the story about, as we've seen it unfold here. So you can be working on that. I'm going to ask you the 5 main approaches to Revelation. Let me give you a list. I'll give you a list right now of the things I want you to know from the 5 approaches. I want to ask you, what do these approaches take each of the following things to mean? Okay? They're all on this handout I've given you, all right? What do they say of the dragon? Who is the dragon, according to their view? Who's the first beast, according to their view? Who's the second beast, according to their view? Who's the harlot? We've got the dragon, the first beast, the second beast, and the harlot. The 144,000, who are they? Tomorrow we'll get to this, the Battle of Armageddon and the 1,000-year reign. I'd like you to know on those 7 things what each of those 5 views says they are. That'll give you kind of the heart of that view a little bit. And so I'd like for you to be able to tell me on the test, name the 5 views, be able to summarize each of the views in a paragraph. Tell me at least one book that expresses that view, and then be able to tell me what each of those 7 things is according to that view. Okay? All right, anybody got any questions or comments before we go today? All right. We shall see you at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Thank you. A good helper here is taking care of me.